Since Europe descended into financial chaos, key institutions such as the ECB, the EU and the IMF have all contributed huge amounts of loans into the system in the hope that perhaps one day everything will all right itself. But what about growth in Europe? Well, with me once again in the studio is Dr. Frank Hollenbeck. Thanks, Frank, for coming in again. We've seen Francois Hollande, the incoming French president, talk about the idea of a growth compact, and we've had Mario Draghi talk about the idea of focusing on perhaps growth more for government, so it's a government priority that perhaps growth should be focused on a lot more. With this current idea that the strategy is that there should be heavy austerity without perhaps enough focus on growth, do you think this in a way is self-defeating?
Well, it's true that growth is the term of the month. Mario Draghi basically said that we should make labor laws more flexible and that we should encourage entrepreneurship. I've been hearing this for 30 years, and I probably will be hearing it for another 30 years. We have that the new French president, Francois Hollande, basically wants to issue project bonds to basically finance infrastructure projects. And here we get into the crux of the problem with Keynesianism. And the problem with Keynesianism is, where does the money come from? In other words, suppose that you go to a supermarket and you have no money and you have no credit cards. How can you buy anything? And the answer is you can't. Okay? And the problem we have is that when the government spends $1, okay, and it taxes $1, okay, it reduces consumption and investment spending by $1. If it borrows $1, it also reduces consumption and investment spending by $1. And if it prints money, which is the third and only way that it can tax you, it reduces the value of the money in your pocket by $1. So the basic point is how can the government spend money without taking money away from the private sector? Now, what Keynes did in his general theory is he gave a justification for government spending. And his justification came from the concept of hoarding, in the sense that when you earn income, you spend some of it. In other words, you have claims on goods and services which you spend. When you save, you basically transfer those claims on goods and services to somebody else who spends it. The third part is you have consumption, savings, or you can have hoarding. And hoarding is claims on goods and services that are basically just held. In other words, hoarding is stuffing money in your mattress. So in other words, the justification for government spending is that it is spending money that otherwise would not have been spent because it had been hoarded. Now, the problem is that hoarding was never really very important. Even the classical economists noted that hoarding was maybe 5% of the money that individuals earned. So if you really consider that hoarding is relatively unimportant, then there's very little role for the government to spend money, because it's basically getting the money from somebody else.
Okay, moving on to my next question, Frank. The ECB has pumped nearly €1 trillion into the European economy with LTR 1 and 2. Can the ECB do any more?
Obama said that we needed to have a common sense strategy toward growth. First, counterfeiting is illegal, and we put counterfeiters in jail because we know that they're basically stealing from the rest of society. But somehow, by making counterfeiting legal and doing it in the trillion euro area, somehow this is supposed to make society better off. Let me remind you that money is a measure of value, and the central bank can influence the money as a measure of value. So for example, this is what happened in 2001, in the sense that when the central bank reduced interest rates, it made long-term projects more attractive than they otherwise would have been, okay? And it led to the boom, and it led to the crash of 2008. And what the central bank is trying to do now is induce this growth, again, this false growth, by reducing interest rates. The problem is that it's the old statement, fool me once, it's your fault, fool me twice, it's my fault. And what's happening is businesses are not willing to go out and start long-term projects because there's low interest rates, because they got burned the first time.
So essentially scaring them away.
Exactly.
Okay, so Frank, we've talked about monetary and fiscal policy playing a key role in growth in Europe. But what do you think, what do you think perhaps is the next step from here on in?
Well, contrary to popular belief, we don't need policies to boost demand. As David Ricardo said in 1821, men err in their production. There is no deficiency of demand. So we need to shift away our current policies that are focused on demand and actually focus on producing the right product at the right prices. And I have a suggestion that will boost growth significantly in France and in other European countries. But I guess that will be for another interview.
Another fascinating insight there. Thanks very much, Dr. Frank, for coming into the studio once again. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid, here on Dukascopy TV, but stick with us again throughout the rest of the day as we bring you exclusive interviews and updates. But until next time, goodbye.